A father and his son were walking through the palace. The father, enraged, struck the boy. The boy fell to the floor, and he never got up again. The father was no ordinary man. He was the Tsar of all the Russias. And the blow that killed his son was not the most terrible act of his life. It was, perhaps, the only one he ever regretted. This is the story of Ivan the Terrible, the first Tsar of Russia, a man who expanded his empire more than anyone in its history, and the same man who sowed terror among his own people.
To understand what Ivan became, you first have to understand where he came from. He was born in 1530 in Moscow. His father died when he was 3 years old, his mother when he was 8. Here's a detail almost no documentary mentions. He was left an orphan in the hands of the boyars, the Russian nobility, who fought each other for power. He grew up watching murders, betrayals, and conspiracies unfold around him. There's an anecdote the court's own chroniclers recorded. As a child, Ivan amused himself by throwing animals off the top of the Kremlin towers just to watch them fall. No one corrected him. The boyars who were supposed to raise him were too busy stealing power from each other to educate him. The child no one disciplined would become the man no one could stop. Historians believe it was there, in that childhood of fear and abandonment, that the paranoia that would consume him was born. At 16, he was crowned, not as Grand Prince, but as something new, Tsar. The word comes from the Latin, Caesar. Ivan didn't just want to rule Russia, he wanted to be the heir to Rome. But what no one told you in school is what happened with that power. Ivan's early years were surprisingly brilliant. He conquered the Khanates of Kazan and Astrakhan, opening the path toward Siberia and multiplying Russian territory. The capture of Kazan in 1552 wasn't just a military victory, it was a feat of engineering. Ivan's engineers dug tunnels beneath the city's walls and blew them up with gunpowder. One of the first times in history that explosive mining decided the outcome of a siege at that scale. Same year, he convened the first Zemsky Sobor, an assembly of nobles, clergy, and commoners, something like an early parliament. He signed trade agreements with Queen Elizabeth I of England, opening the first direct trade route between Russia and England through the White Sea. The same man who would later order a massacre was at that very moment building institutions that would outlast him by centuries. To celebrate the conquest of Kazan, he had St. Basil's Cathedral built in Red Square, a building that today is Russia's visual symbol around the world. Legend says that once the work was finished, Ivan had the architects blinded so they could never build anything as beautiful anywhere else. Historians doubt it's true, but the fact that the legend exists and that people are still telling it 500 years later says something about the reputation Ivan had already earned. He reformed the army. He created a legal code, the Sudebnik of 1550, which unified the laws across all Russian territory for the first time. For the first time, Russia stopped being a patchwork of feudal territories and became a centralized state. At its peak, Ivan's empire became the largest state in all of Europe, nearly twice the size of any other European power at the time. It was the territorial foundation on which, generations later, the largest country on earth would grow. The same genius that built that empire carried within it the seed of its own ruin. The seed had a name, Anastasia Romanovna, his first wife. Chroniclers of the time, even the ones most critical of Ivan, agree on one thing: he genuinely loved her. 13 years of marriage, 6 children, and for the first and last time in his life, an anchor of emotional stability. In 1560, Anastasia died suddenly. Centuries later, forensic analysis of her remains detected abnormal levels of mercury, evidence many historians interpret as poisoning. Ivan never got over it. He blamed the boyars, and from that moment on, he began to see traitors in every corner of the palace. He wasn't entirely wrong. In 1564, Prince Andrei Korpsky, one of Ivan's most capable generals, defected to Lithuania. From there, wrote him a letter accusing him of tyranny and unjustified cruelty. Ivan replied personally, in a correspondence that survives to this day, page after page, defending the Tsar's absolute power as a divine mandate, with no limits and no room for objection. For Ivan, Korpsky's betrayal was the final confirmation that he could no longer trust anyone. Yet, that same year of the betrayal, 1564, Ivan also left another, much less known mark. He backed the printer Ivan Fyodorov in publishing The Apostle, the first precisely dated book ever printed on Russian soil, the birth of printing in Russia. The reaction wasn't what you'd expect. The monk copyists, who saw their trade threatened, accused Fyodorov of heresy, and the printer had to flee the country to save his life.
The same Tsar who funded Russia's first printing press let the man who made it possible be hunted down. Once again, the same contradiction. Building with one hand, destroying with the other. Is the detail that defines everything that came after.
In 1565, Ivan did something unprecedented. He abandoned Moscow, settled in Alexandrov, and announced his abdication. The terrified people begged him to return. Ivan agreed, in exchange for absolute, unlimited power. That was the birth of the oprichnina, a private army of loyalists, dressed in black, that became the Tsar's instrument of terror. The oprichniki could detain, torture, and execute anyone without trial. The numbers are hard to pin down. Historians disagree, but the chronicles of the time speak of thousands of executions. The city of Novgorod was completely sacked. Tens of thousands of its inhabitants are estimated to have died.
The head of it all was Malyuta Skuratov, Ivan's most trusted man and the most feared face of the oprichnina. His name, centuries later, is still synonymous with cruelty in the Russian language. Said Skuratov personally strangled Metropolitan Philip II, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, after Philip dared to publicly condemn the Tsar's massacres from the pulpit. No one else dared to speak up after that. Meanwhile, abroad, Ivan was waging the Livonian War, 25 years of conflict against Poland, Lithuania, and Sweden over access to the Baltic Sea. The war that was supposed to secure his empire ended up draining the treasury, the army, the will of the Russian people. The Tsar, who had won Kazan in months, couldn't win Livonia in a quarter century.
I watched the executions with pleasure. Said he had a device built that let him pull the cords of his victims and make them dance while he laughed in the background. He was a man who had turned terror into a tool of government. After Anastasia, Ivan married 6 more times. Practically unheard of for the Russian Orthodox Church, which barely tolerated a second marriage. Several of those wives ended up locked away in convents or dead under circumstances that were never explained. Each new wedding was, more and more, a desperate search for something he was never going to find again. Nothing compares to what happened in 1581.
November 19, 1581, Ivan met with his son and heir, Tsarevich Ivan, in the palace. They argued. The most widely accepted version among historians says that the Tsar, in a fit of rage, struck his son in the head with his iron-tipped staff. The young man fell. Ivan, seeing him bleed, knelt down, took him in his arms, and it was too late. His son died days later.
We have to be precise here. Not all historians accept that version. Some argue the blow was accidental, or that the young man was already ill. Repin's famous painting, showing Ivan embracing his dying son, is an artistic interpretation, not a photograph. The only documented fact is that Tsarevich Ivan died in 1581, and that his father was destroyed by it. The Tsar aged overnight. He stopped governing. He died in 1584, playing a game of chess, leaving behind a kingdom with no capable heir. Surviving son, Theodore, was a pious man, with neither the skill nor the interest to rule. Others described him almost as a monk who'd wandered onto a throne. Real power quickly passed to an ambitious noble named Boris Godunov, Fyodor's brother-in-law. When Fyodor died without an heir in 1598, the dynasty Ivan had founded died with him. Godunov himself would go on to be crowned Tsar that same year. The noble who had run things from the shadows for years finally sat on the throne Ivan had built. It wouldn't last. He died in 1605, in the middle of a famine that devastated the country, with no dynasty of his own to succeed him. Russia would plunge into the chaos known as the Time of Troubles, 15 years of famine, impostors, and civil war, until a new dynasty, the Romanov, took the throne in 1613.
Ivan the Terrible was an enigma, a man who multiplied Russia's territory several times over, who built a modern state, and who, at the same time, destroyed his own people, his own dynasty, and his own son. His legacy is contradictory: the Tsar who built Russia and the monster who nearly devoured it. Still debate whether he was a genius, a psychopath, or both. The answer, probably, is both. There's something else that outlived Ivan, something still alive today. The oprichnina, that private army answering only to the Tsar, with no law and no trial, is in effect the first secret police in Russian history. Centuries later, Tsarist Russia would have its Okhrana, the Soviet Union its NKVD, its KGB. The logic Ivan invented in 1565, absolute power watching and punishing without limits, never fully disappeared from Russia.
In the 20th century, Joseph Stalin turned Ivan the Terrible into a model of government. He commissioned filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein to make a trilogy about his life, and privately said that Ivan's mistake hadn't been cruelty. It was not being ruthless enough with the boyars who were still alive. To Stalin, Ivan wasn't a warning about the dangers of absolute power. He was an instruction manual.
Today, Russia is still arguing over what to do with his memory. In 2016, the city of Oryol unveiled the first public statue of Ivan the Terrible in all of Russian history that set off a wave of protests. To some, he was a tyrant who didn't deserve a monument. To others, a founder of the state who deserved to be honored. Nearly 500 years after his death, Russia still can't agree on who Ivan the Terrible really was. Some empires are measured in stone. Ivan's is measured in the shadow he left over his own land. And that shadow, even today, is still there. So, what do you think? Is Ivan a genius or a monster? Tell me in the comments. And if you liked this story, hit like and subscribe, because real history is almost always more incredible than the official one.